Thank you so much for attending our Education Policy Forum today. My name is Tracy Kosolcharoen. I will be helping to moderate this panel. And just a little about me, I currently serve as the chair of the Cupertino Planning Commission. I am also a graduate of our local schools, Free Kennedy Monte Vista, and I am a parent of 2 children. So I am very passionate about ensuring that the needs of our community's hardworking families are represented. And many of us share the same concerns about the ever-changing landscape of technology and policy. So today we're excited to have a really incredible lineup of experts that will be able to share their perspectives on these issues. So we'll start with an overview of the history of education policy recently in California. We will share a case study of one parent who is challenging the system. Then we'll move on to hear from some community leaders and then have expert advice from a college admissions advisor from IUMAX, as well as a little bit of Q&A at the end. So first, I am pleased to introduce our Cupertino Vice Mayor, Liang Chao, and she was also former mayor last year as well. She's also a former CUSD board member. And I first met Vice Mayor Chao when she joined many parents with me in the fight against school closures. Vice Mayor Chao is a rare asset to our community, and she's very passionate about education and has a proven track record of advocating for us. So we're excited to have her here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So after my presentation, we will hear from Nan Zhong for the student for fair admission, and then we will invite the panelists to come up. So I'd like to give an overview of what happened since Prop 209 and to today, so that the parents today can be aware of all the laws and policies that will be affecting their students in school and even for college admission. So we all know that in the Declaration of Independence, there is the ideal that all men are created equal. And the 14th Amendment has the promise that we have equal protection under the laws. But what does that really mean in practice? Do we expect equal treatment for everyone? Do we expect that there is never differential treatment between people based on their background? And is it fair to use group identity to help people who face discrimination? And if we want to help them, what is the best way to help them? And Prop 209 is one answer the California voters gave to help define equality under the law in 1996. I will come to that later. Here are 3 different ideas when people have when they talk about equal treatment. Equality. Equal treatment. When you treat people absolutely the same, equally, regardless of their race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin? Or do we want equal opportunity? Which does not mean we treat everyone exactly the same, but we do want to offer the same real opportunity for everyone in considering the barriers, the hardships, and past discrimination they individually face. Or do we want to consider equal outcome? Where? I don't know, is there? Okay. And or some people insist on equality with equal outcome, where there are gaps in results across groups and they want to use group identity to define what is equal. And this tends to lead to identifying people, treating people differently based on their group identity. Is that equality? And the affirmative action, Prop 209 are the 2 debates that people have been having. Affirmative action was adopted as a method of trying to achieve equal opportunity. But there is very strict limitations on how it can be applied. And in Prop 209, it's trying to achieve, I think, a more strict to make sure that the problem is what should the government do? Can the government, who has a lot of power and funding, should they use that to favor certain group or not? These are the questions people have been asking. How would that affect people in school? For example, there has been a concept of equity grading. Should grades ever be adjusted based on race, ethnicity, or even the adversity that students face? How about discipline? Should students be disciplined differently because of their different consequences? So for the same behavior, some students might get more severe punishment than others. Is that fair? And then, of course, there is the debate in school is should there be honors class, AP class, advanced classes, where some people might get in, some people cannot. Is that fair for everyone? And then how about awards and recognition? What happens if some groups tend to get more of the awards of recognition than others? Then is that fair? But if it's based on their ability, their competency, is that unfair? So these are the questions I think that's facing many people in schools. And for students, you might want to think about, would the system feel fair if rules change depending on your race, your ethnicity, your sex, or national origin? And these are characteristics about yourself that you cannot change. Is that fair? So where is the line? We do want to help students so that they can get the support they need to get tutoring, counseling, mentoring, outreach. But how can we avoid discrimination or preferences when we are trying to achieve that ideal of trying to give everyone a better chance to succeed? So is the school helping students based on individual needs, disadvantage or achievement gaps, or are the schools treating students based on their identity groups? So back in 1996, California put Prop 209 on the ballot for the voters to vote on to amend the California Constitution with this sentence: the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to anyone based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the areas of public education, public employment, and public contracting. So that's voted that's put on the ballot and voted successfully approved by the voter. But then with that amended constitution, there is still exception. If a program gets federal funding, they are still able to use race-conscious affirmative action. And if there were court orders, or it could be a sex-based program under federal law, that can still discriminate based on these characteristics. So the practical effect is right after the passing of Prop 209, there were many race-conscious or race-based affirmative action programs that were stopped. And then the government and the UC have moved towards trying to consider holistic admission, for example, so that they consider the student as a whole rather than considering facts. And for public contracting, the governments have been trying to ensure the government reach out to minority groups so that they have more access to programs, but doesn't really use any race when deciding which one gets the contract. So it's better outreach to different minority groups. But in reality, even though we have this in the law, unless someone actively challenges any program or practice with lawsuit, race-conscious programs are still present in California. So in 1996, 209 passed with over 54% of vote. That's considered a pretty large margin. And the issue is really about, we are trying to distinguish before Prop 209, affirmative action can be used. That means in affirmative action that's adopted by the federal government, race can be used to try to correct historical harms. But it does say you need to use it very carefully. And the Prop 209 is trying to make sure that we don't have any discrimination or even preferential treatment based on race in California. And this has big impact, of course, in college admission. There has been multiple lawsuits about how the college can consider in college admission. And most recently in 2023, we have the Harvard lawsuit that Supreme Court has decided that Harvard lost and they should not be consider race when they do college admission. However, they can still use it as consider it holistically. So it shouldn't be an admission factor, but then it's really hard to prove. Then in California, since 2020, we have seen another change in college admission where SAT and ACT were dropped from the UC admission process. Critics argue that tests can reflect an equal access to preparation on the maybe economic status of the students. But supporters also argue scores provide a common economic lever for all students. And UC today still does not consider SAT and ACT. However, MIT has restored testing, and they said that, in fact, testing helped them identify talented students from disadvantaged backgrounds, because as long as they can get a good grade on SAT, they have proven their ability to all the colleges, regardless of their background. Taking that away really takes away a method for them to prove their amazing ability. After MIT, many other universities have also restored SAT or have announced that they will restore SAT after COVID. And then there is a series of lawsuits on the admission. I think the Supreme Court has decided through multiple cases on exactly how to apply affirmative action in college admission. Race can be considered as part of an affirmative action. However, quota has been outlawed. But how do you not consider race without considering quota? And that's in implementation that's being debated. And then in the Harvard case, Supreme Court again barred race itself as an admissions factor, even though Harvard claimed they did not use quota, but they did consider race as an important factor in their admission. After that, many colleges do know that they need to have limited race-conscious admission. However, in reality, how do we know whether they do consider them or not? If there is no transparency in the record, how do we know? If there is no one filing a lawsuit, how do we know? So we see more lawsuits. For example, Richard Sander is a professor in Southern California, a law professor. He has been trying to get law schools in California to release the data to confirm or deny whether there is a mismatch of students meaning that students who are less qualified are being admitted to law school. But the UC has been refusing to release the data to him, and he's still fighting for that. And then more recently, we have Stanley Zhong, who was hired by Google right out of high school as a full-time engineer. However, he was denied to all the UC campuses that he applied for. As a result, he and his dad have filed a lawsuit against UC, alleging covert racial preferences, despite the Prop 209, which says no racial preference at all, and despite the Harvard lawsuit. So this matters for our families because I think we need to continue to demand transparency in admission data. And we need to continue to demand that race-neutral tools are genuinely neutral in practice. After Prop 209 passed in 1996, there were attempts trying to overturn it. People somehow think using racial preference is important. And in 2020, there was a big attempt to just repeal the entire Prop 209. That was put on the ballot in 2020. Almost everyone that has any name recognition in California supported Prop 19. In the end, Prop 19 lost by a big, Prop 16 lost by a big margin, thank you, of 57.2%. It's an even bigger margin than Prop 209. Despite the campaign, the Yes campaign spent 17 times the campaign contribution than the No campaign. So it's clear the people doesn't want racial preference in public education, public contracting, and public employment. And not only that, you can see that the no on red, the red part is no on Prop 16. That's like almost every county of the state. And if you compare the map with the 2020 presidential vote, where Biden won by a large margin in California, as expected. However, many of the counties that Biden won actually rejected Prop 16. So this is Prop 16 failed across party lines. And then surprisingly, every Hispanic majority county in California rejected Prop 16 also. So the group that the proponent of Prop 16 is said that they are trying to help actually rejected it. They don't want to be labeled by a certain group the identity so that they have to be treated privilegedly. They want to prove their ability through their, like everyone else. And we are lucky one of 9 states that have a similar ban on racial preference, but that doesn't happen in every state. And there is a continuous effort trying to overturn Prop 209. And in 2014, there was an effort, it was defeated, and then right after 2020, you have 2023, 2024, they proposed ACA 7, and ACA 7 continue to be treated because they know that statewide, if a straight repeal would not have support, so they are trying to narrow the scope continuously. Right now, it seems like the ACA 7 will be getting onto the 2028 ballot. So there will be another effort to try and repeal Prop 209. In this current version of ACA 7, they are trying to replace the broader phrase of public education so that racial preference can be applied to narrower scope of programs or specific areas. And we will see how that. So I would like to talk a little bit about how a proposition is got on the ballot. A proposition, you will see a lot of proposition usually on the general election ballot. It's usually a question placed on the ballot asking voters, do you support something, yes or no? It might be a bond measure, it might be a new law that's proposed. How did they get there? It could get there through initiative process. Citizens collect enough signatures, they can put it on the ballot. And Proposition 209 was a citizens' initiative. And it could also be placed on there by the legislatures with two-thirds votes in each house. And for ACA 7 was that kind of proposition. The legislators wants to put that on the ballot. And ACA represents Assembly Constitution Amendment. California has 2 houses. So sometimes you see SCA, that's Senate Constitution Amendment. That means the amendment initiated from the Senate or initiated from Assembly. But it needs approval of both houses by 2/3 for constitution amendment. You sometimes will see state bills, AB or SB. Those are bills that's proposing law, not constitution amendment. Those only needs a majority vote from both houses. I'd like to mention some recent bill that I think has raised a lot of eyebrows in this community is caste discrimination. So in the past, we only see race, ethnicity, but then there are certain groups who wants to make sure caste is one of the protected class in California law. So they proposed SB 403 in 2023. It passed both houses in the legislature. However, it was vetoed by Governor Newsom. The veto said California already prohibits discrimination based on ancestry and other categories. Therefore, state civil rights law, therefore this classification is not necessary. However, in other states, the caste discrimination is still being adopted, and then there are continuing to be pushed to consider caste as a protected. So the question is, when does naming a protected group clarify rights, and when might it create new concerns about stereotypes or unequal treatment? In conclusion, I think the question is bigger than Prop 209 or ACA 7. It's really about how do schools expand opportunities while keeping it fair. We do want to help everyone. We want to help to empower all the students of different abilities to be able to be successful in their own way. We can build stronger preparation with different supportive classes. But we also want to make sure that we keep the standards clear. What do you need to do to get a certain grade so that students know exactly what to expect? How do we want to implement discipline? How do we want to implement advanced classes? Advanced classes support a group of students who actually have still special needs, gifted students who would otherwise be very bored if your classes do not meet their needs. So I think a lot of school districts are trying to remove advanced classes. Is that fair to the students who need them? And then award scholarships and admissions should they be considering the composition of the students who actually get them, or what will be the fair criteria and what will be transparent when we for these standards. So I would encourage all the parents to question any school programs that you come across. What exactly is a policy? Who benefits from that policy? Who is excluded? What criteria are used to select the mission or for those programs? And a final thought, a fair system should open doors, remove barriers, but still treat each student as an individual, rather than whatever group identity they might identify with. Yeah. So, thank you.
So thank you very much, Vice Mayor, for that very edifying overview of policy in the state in the past few years. So now we are going to zero in on one of the case studies that was listed in this presentation, the Stanley Zhong versus UCs. And he could not be present today, but we are going to bring up a video that...
Hello, my name is Nan Zhong. I'm an Asian American parent in California. Last year, in 2025, my son Stanley and I sued 4 universities, including the University of California, for discriminating against Asian Americans. If you're an Asian family facing college admission very soon, the following presentation is for you. My name is Nan Zhong. Today, I'd like to share with you our lawsuit against 4 universities. In this particular one, University of California, for discriminating against Asian Americans. We'll talk about what led to the lawsuit, where the lawsuit stands, and what it means for other Asian American families facing college admission very soon. For starters, let's talk about the reason leading to the lawsuit. In 2023, my son Stanley was rejected by 5 UC undergraduate computer science program. But shortly after, Google hired him for a PhD level position, or a level that requires equivalent PhD experience. In Google's terminology, it's called L4, software engineering position in 2023. And also, shortly after, in 2025, he received an outstanding impact performance rating. So there's no question, he's very good at computer science and related subject. And you can see that in the following achievements that are on his college applications. For example, he made it to the final list in both Google Code Jam and the Meta Hacker Cup. He won the second place globally in MIT Battle Code and first place in the US, and third place globally in CMU, CTF, and so on and so forth. Worth noting is that he also created a completely free e-signing website called RapidSign during the pandemic, because he was unhappy that none of the existing providers provided any relief when there was a surging demand for e-signing. And in the AWS architected review, AWS called RapidSign one of the most secure and efficient applications they ever reviewed. And with all that credential, he was rejected for undergrad computer science admission. So we started asking questions. We engaged with UC for about a year. That led to nowhere. We petitioned lawmakers, Governor Newsom, none of that went anywhere. And his story was so interesting that it gathered national media attention and also was cited in a congressional hearing. But more importantly, I received a lot letters, emails, communication from other Asian American parents who faced similar situation, super qualified students who were rejected left and right by the universities in America. So Stanley's case is definitely not alone. That's why eventually, after going nowhere with the UC, we decided to bring a lawsuit against the universities. As we get into the lawsuit, we start to realize there are significant barriers. That explains why, even though Asian has been facing discrimination in college admission for decades, there's been no case brought by Asians for something like this. And I summarize it in the following 6 barriers. There's a lack of data to demonstrate the universities are discriminating because they don't give you the data. It takes a lot of money to litigate a case like this. And the third was a big surprise to me. I thought America is full of lawyers, but we had an extremely difficult time finding lawyers representing us. We'll have more details later in this presentation. Also, very few witnesses are willing to come forward to testify against the universities. And fifthly, we also usually have the tricky situation of getting plaintiffs to bring the lawsuit forward, because usually, even if they do, they also face a short standing issue, which I'll explain a little bit later. So let's talk about the data aspect first. The data is hard to come by because the universities have a institutional evasion. It's intentionally concealing all the data. In other words, if you take a look at what the UC Berkeley Law School Dean says publicly, that it's okay to hide your illegal activity unless you don't leave any evidence behind. So that's why the university is working so hard to keep the data away from public scrutiny. On top of that, they also eliminated any objective measures, such as the SAT, ACT scores, because you don't have anything to compare. Then it's harder for the plaintiffs to prove there is discrimination. And UC and the universities have gone extreme length to keep their data secret. So UCLA, for example, not only refused data examination requests from its own admissions committee, even the UC Board of Regents, the chair of the regents, Mr. John Morris, was denied access to admissions data back in early 2000 when he discovered there's a blatant discrimination against Asian Americans. UCA fought freedom of information requests and even lawsuits requesting admissions data. So they're guarding the data like a mafia guarding a crime scene. And as we can see, after Supreme Court ruling in 2023, Columbia and the university data shows that the Asian Americans still face discrimination even after the court ruling. As another data point, Asian enrollment at Johns Hopkins jumped from 26% before the SFA ruling to 45% after. So it tells us the extent the universities are discriminating against Asian Americans. And here's a table regarding UCSD, or University of California, San Diego's admissions data, because the universities don't release any data. So we work backwards. We reverse engineer from the high school side. And this table shows the San Diego area high schools. So as you can see, there's a strong correlation. Typically, the higher the Asian percentage in their student body, the higher their academic ranking is. And back in 2018, they did have higher UCSD admission rate. But in 2023, the admission rate is totally in the opposite. Now, if you are a very competitive Asian-concentrated high school, you're going to have a much lower chance of getting UCSD, even with the same qualification. So for example, Westview, which used to have 65% admission rate, and in 2023, it dropped to 13%. So some folks out there use Stanley's story as a way to generate business for their counseling service, for example. They keep saying, oh, it's because his essay is not good enough, or he's missing this or that. I don't believe any college counselor could make up the difference between 65% and 13%. It's a systematic issue, not an individual issue. How's the Bay Area doing? Bay Area high schools, their admission rates to UC Berkeley follows a similar trend. The higher the Asian American percentage, the lower the UC Berkeley admission rate. And at this point, if you're a kid or you're going to a very competitive high school like Lynbrook or Harker, your UC Berkeley admission rate chance is below the state average. That's very sad. And some people are saying, well, this is just a matter of systematic racism. But wait a minute, there's data that shows that Asian students spend 2 or 3 times as much hours on their academic work than other groups. So why are they doing better? This chart tells you why. And you can see that income difference does not fully explain the study time disparity. And if you go to the next slide here, you can see that strikingly, this chart requires a little bit of explanation. The top one is Asian SAT math score. You're going to see that the Asian American students in the lowest income bracket scores higher on the SAT math So this is not something that's explained by resource disparity. Some people are saying the SAT is just a reflection of wealth. This chart says that's not the case. And you may wonder why this chart only shows 1995 data. That's because this chart is so jarring and so inconvenient for some people's narrative that the institution publishing this data stopped doing it after 1995. So basically their reason is that, well, if we don't show you the data, then you have nothing to show that Asians are really working hard and doing extremely well even with low income. So how bad the situation got? The UC, the University of California, eliminated the SAT and ACT in 2020. Now it is reported that the UCSD, one of the STEM-focused UC campuses, is having extremely difficulty with their freshmen's math level. In their math placement test for freshmen, 3% of UCD freshmen cannot solve for x in 7 plus 2 equals x plus 6. That's elementary level math. And 10% of their freshmen can't even expand a binomial. And in response, finally, just a few weeks ago, in May 2026, 14,000 UC STEM professors are now calling for the reinstatement of SAT and ACT. I can understand why. They can't have, they're basically going, this university professors are going back to teaching middle school or even elementary math. That's not what the UC is for. And if they're also looking for students to do research for their research projects, good luck. So I can understand why the UC professors are getting so fed up with this math SAT nonsense. In a word, UC's admissions are rigged. They got rid of objective measures like the SAT and ACT and admitted a whole bunch of students that are not qualified. And of course, the victims are highly qualified Asian Americans like Stanley. Now that covers the data aspect. The second barrier, no money. As a reference point, the famous SFFA, or Student for Fair Admission versus Harvard, took 9 years. Harvard spent $30 million on it, and SFFA spent $10 million on it. That's the kind of financial resources needed to litigate a university admission case. Because they spend taxpayer dollars on it, effectively they have an unlimited purse to draw from. Another surprise, this is something really surprised me. I thought America is a country full of lawyers. I heard ambulance chasers before coming to America. I thought if there's any shortage, there's never going to be a shortage of lawyers in America. Guess what? We could not find lawyers. So we had to file the lawsuit on our own. It's not only because just a fairly small amount of money. More importantly, as I understand later, taking a case like ours is pretty much going to be a career suicide. If a lawyer has ambition to work for a big law firm, taking our case, it will end that prospect. So it took us a year to find some legal representation. Along the way, we talked to at least a few dozen lawyers, including large national firms and the local legal organizations and the boutique practice. I got all kinds of reasons. Some people are worried about the judicial bias in California. Some people some lawyers are worried about UC's deep pocket. And one lawyer explicitly cited his worry about death threat when declining representation. So that came out to be a big surprise, and we still remain pro se, meaning that we're representing ourselves in one of the 4 cases. Interestingly, recently I read books about the Japanese in internment camp after Pearl Harbor, and they had a hard time finding lawyers too. So history does not repeat, it does rhyme. On the other side, the university is represented by top national firms like WilmerHale, representing UC. WilmerHale, by the way, represented Harvard in SFA versus Harvard, and ORIC, led by the former Washington state attorney, is now defending University of Washington. So we are 2 pro se litigants with no legal training going up against powerful legal law firms. Another barrier, it's really hard to find witnesses. People are afraid to come forward. And if you don't believe me, take New York Times words. Advocating for equal treatment on college campus is considered career suicide for faculty members, even if they have tenure. As another extremely disappointing and surprise incident, in our UC lawsuit, we had one named witness, Professor Perry Liang. He's somebody I admire for decades, and he published his story in Washington Street Journal and courageously agreed to testify about his observation of use of race in UC's graduate admission and faculty hiring. But shortly after we filed the paper with his name on it, UC sent staff member into his office, took his computer, wiped the data on it, and destroyed practically all his personal items he stored in his office too. That's all done without his presence or knowledge. And to this day, UC even still denied this happened. And after we filed a sworn affidavit by Professor Perry Liang, UC has not replied. And this is a year ago. And to me, I can only see this in a movie like done by something like a mafia. Another barrier, it's really hard to have plaintiffs on a lawsuit like this. If a student got denied by a university and is going to another university, I can say with high level of confidence that student probably does not want to come out as a plaintiff in a lawsuit like this, because the campus environment is very hostile for anybody taking that position. Anybody challenging discrimination in college admission is going to be vilified as racist on college campus. And the nicer ones I've seen directing at Stanley and me are going back to China. And of course, there are other comments far more nasty than this. And finally, this is another critical barrier why it's so hard to bring lawsuits like this: legal standing. For you to bring a lawsuit, you have to be a person directly involved in the action, and there needs to be a way for the university to compensate you, and those are the foundations of having legal foundation. As laid out in this timeline, it takes about 9 or 10 years to go through the entire litigation process for have an outcome for a case like this. But the plaintiffs would lose legal standing when they reach their college junior year, because at that time, the university can say, well, I can no longer admit you since you cannot transfer to me anymore, and therefore I'm going to file this petition with the court, and court will grant automatic win to the universities. So it's extremely hard to bring a lawsuit like this. So you may ask, how did the SFFA overcome this barrier? Well, they pulled off a miracle. They built a pipeline of plaintiffs to keep the lawsuit going throughout the entire 9 years. It's extremely difficult to do. So clearly, suing university for discrimination in its mission is a David versus Goliath fight. But luckily for us, we have a sling, and that's AI. So no matter what the opposing counsel is throwing at us, delay tactics, continuous paperwork, non-stop paperwork, and even the threat of fee shifting, AI handled that beautifully. So we have no legal training, but we relied on AI to draft our legal filings. And in fact, AI exposed dozens of legal errors in the opposing counsel's legal filings. And a lawyer who reviewed the AI draft legal counsel, his comment was that he was blown away by the quality of the draft by the AI. And now, in another interesting turn of events, University of Washington's lawyer are now demanding we turn over our AI prompts. And of course, we asked AI how to respond to that. AI gave us a response. We're sending that response back to the opposing counsel and tell them in a lawyerly way, effectively, to get lost. So going back to the barrier, how did Stanley's unique situation overcome those barriers? We talked about no data. Now we have the high school data that we reverse engineered, and we have the UC math placement test. Those serve interesting and compelling data points to tell us that UC is discriminating based on race. No money? Well, AI help us cut down our legal costs by 90 to 95%. No lawyer? Well, use AI. For the part that requires witness, now Professor Perry Liang has come forward to testify, and we're going to rely on his testimony for this phase of the litigation. For plaintiff, Stanley is not going to college. That's a crucial difference from other potential Asian American applicants, because he's not going to college. he's not facing the hostile college environment. And more importantly, because he's not approaching his junior year in college, he has an evergreen legal standing, which allows him to bring this lawsuit in a way that can go on for many, many years. Finally, it takes a village to raise kids. When interviewed by a journalist asking me, hey, Stanley's working at Google now, why are you still bringing the lawsuit? My answer is that, well, I have other kids, and I'm also doing this for my future grandkids. I hope that's what we can unite on, doing it for Asian Americans for generations to come. With that in mind, we formed a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit called SWORD. It stands for Students Who Oppose Racial Discrimination. We want to use a sword to poke through the discrimination ways that universities are using. The website is at sword.education. And if you want to see this presentation again, the self-link to the presentation is at bit.ly/suinguc. And finally, we would greatly appreciate your donation to our nonprofit SWORD. If, for example, if you work at Google, you can go to /give and search for SWORD and find the nonprofit students who oppose racial discrimination and get donation and Google's match to the organization. Even though we reduced the legal cost by 90% for the first year, we still paid $200,000 out of pocket for suing the 4 universities. So we definitely appreciate any help. With that in mind, I'd like to wrap up the presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is at sword.education. You can find all the media reports of the lawsuit, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much to Nan for providing that presentation, and we will now, we've heard a lot about different policies and the latest in this space, and now we will have some community representatives provide their opinions on this. So we have Santosh Rao, who is the 2025 Cupertino Planning Commission Chair and currently serves with me on this commission as well, and Tony Guan, who is Vice President of the Equal Rights for All PAC. And Tony has been a very active community leader, and he has organized rallies for awareness on many different policy issues, including most recently Prop 36 and ACA 7. So we're excited to have their perspectives today. So, and you can just both start off by introducing yourselves.
Thank you, Tracy. My name is Santosh Rao. I'm the current Planning Commission Chair for current Planning Commissioner for Cupertino and was the 2025 Planning Commission Chair. Firstly, I want to say what an inspiring presentation by our Vice Mayor Chao. Really top-class educational quality, and really learned something out of that, and makes us appreciate the rigor that she brings to everything she does. So did want to say that, and also what an inspiring presentation by Nan Zhong. Really gives us a sense of what it takes to achieve even the basics for our students. So just to quickly wrap up my introduction, I am a VP in a large cap tech company. My work focuses on private cloud infrastructure. And so when you're looking at all the AI data center boom, my team and my areas basically focus on building out those infrastructures worldwide. So that's what I do. I have a 30-year career in tech and worked across many of the hyperscalers and small and large companies. So that's my background. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Tony. I'm actually, I think I have 2 kids who grew up in our school district, Cupertino School District and also Fremont High School District. So in the past years, I have been working on a lot of different issues. One of them is the Proposition 16, Liang 16, in 2020. We actually started our very first car rally against it during the pandemic right here in the Cupertino Library. So then we also did Yesong rally, Yesong 36, that is for the petty to defeat to repeal proposition, what's the number? 47. yeah, so that's a petty theft bill. We actually succeeded that one. But unfortunately, Governor Newsom refused to fund it. So even though the voters voted to get Proposition 36 passed, then no fund, and nothing could be done there. So that's unfortunate, but we tried our best. So, and yeah, so similar to Santosh, I'm also working in a high-tech company, currently management. So also learning a lot about AI, and we just learned that Nan use a lot of AI there, and to do good work. So yeah, that's very inspiring.
Great, thank you. So, the Vice Mayor mentioned a little bit about ACA 7. Since I know, Tony, you have done a lot of advocacy work on this, and I know, Santosh, you probably have opinions on this as well. What should parents know about ACA 7, and if it does pass, how would it impact students? What do you think the impact would be?
Maybe let me start. So ACA 7 is trying to cut Proposition 209, which is part of our current California Constitution, the Equal Rights Protection Clause, saying government should not grant preference or discriminate against individuals or a group of people solely based on race, skin color, gender, or origin, like country of origin. So ACA 7 narrows the protection. Actually, so the Proposition 209 was about public employment, public education, and public contracting. So ACA 7 narrows down it, saying that, okay, so right now the employment contracting stays there, but for the education, it adds a higher education there, meaning rule out K-12. And it also adds only for college admission and enrollment, meaning everything else still allowed. Right? Why they added the college admission? Because Superior Court already ruled out that to be illegal, right? So then our legislators, they have nothing else to do. They just want to push for this kind of race-based policies. So they said, okay, now that it's ruled illegal, let's add there, but leave everything else unprotected. So we can talk more about the result or because the consequence about this bill, but you should be alarmed. Everybody should be alarmed here. Yeah.
Thank you, Tony. That was insightful, especially given your history fighting for issues in this space for over a decade. And I think just looking at this from a policy perspective, you think about if we applied policies that created these changes, what is the impact to an employment situation that is already challenged by AI? And we have a global student body that is coming from a diverse set of educational institutions from different countries, and they are all pushing the best of breed for education. And so when we impact policies that limit opportunities for students based on various factors, we are impacting the competitiveness of our cities, our school districts, our states, and ultimately the US. And what that does, and we see that in the industry, is that the jobs transition to where the talent exists and where the talent is competitive. And that means the jobs they leave Silicon Valley, they leave California, they leave the US. And where do we see this? We see this in a variety of places. In my job, I travel almost every week, and I'm in Texas at least once a month. And Texas is thriving, and students, as well as a mature workforce, are building out a whole new economy in Texas, not just in tech, not just in oil and gas, but also in financials. And so you're seeing that the economy starts to shift away from California towards states where education is valued, where people are treated without differentiation, and where merit matters. And not only is this happening as a rebalancing across states, but it is happening as a rebalancing across countries. When we make it difficult for the best student population to immigrate to the best nation for opportunities, what happens is the jobs reverse immigrate to the nations that have the best student populations. And so we're seeing that happening right now. A number of tech companies that have resulted in rebalancing of their workforces, taking advantage of employment centers in India and in various parts in Asia. And the same thing is happening with AI. We are seeing that you can rebalance to smaller teams, making the industry far more disrupted than anything I have seen in 30 years in the tech industry. And if you think about the tech industry itself, its lifespan is probably, over the course of 40, 50 years. In 40, 50 years, the industry went from its infancy to where AI is completely redefining what it is. So as we think about this as student bodies, as parents, as families, and as voters, we need to be on the alert to make sure that every level that we vote, whether it be a school district, a college district, a city council, a county board, or at the state and federal level, we are thinking about the consequences of who we are voting for, what their policy choices are, and what the unintended consequences and side effects of those are. And so let's continue to look at ACA 7 and other ballot measures, not just ACA 7, that continue to come at us in every election, and look at how we as a voter community can really be informing our fellow voters, informing our fellow parents, and taking action against it. Thank you.
Thank you, and that was very well said. I agree. So, what we just saw in this past presentation from Nan, most students still pursue a standard post-secondary education, but we are starting to see a shift towards alternative career pathways and more of a focus on technical career education as opposed to just traditional AP classes. And now you see several major companies like Google and Apple hiring for certain types of roles without requiring college degrees. So do you think college is still the default goal for students, or is that changing?
That's a good question. I can only offer my personal opinion. So we have seen Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and they all quit their good top schools and to start their startup, right? And we have seen people like high-talented Nan Zhong, who got hired directly from high school. But we have to also realize they might be one from all of 1,000 people who could manage to get their passion enlarged and identified very early in their career life. But for most of our kids, including me, myself, we did not even know what we want to do, even in the college. It doesn't matter if it's good college or not. And as a parent, I think it's very important for us to understand it. If you find your kids, your students have not found their passion in college, even in maybe junior year, right? Don't blame them. That's natural. A lot of people should not even figure out what they want to do in their 50s, 40s. Normal. It's just a different, life is a discovery process. And the success is never defined by one single thing. Right? You get to the top school, are you, by definition, successful? Not necessary. Right? You start a new company, a good company, and you go public, you get rich. Is that successful? Maybe for some people, but I can definitely say, not everybody in that state are happy and are thinking of themselves as successful. So that's a very deep question. Right? So now back to the question, is college still the default path career way? I think yes, for most of us, most of the students around, right? Of course, there will be some exceptional ones. They find other ways. Even for the college pathway, for this default way, right? Some kids can, as they actually have their passion in non-STEM discipline, right? Now they got identified by their school they like, and they get admitted without even taking any of those tests. Right? It happens. So this I would say at a level of probability, going to college gives the kids a goal in their certain phase of the growth, and keep them going, and have them to have the necessary struggle and to grow up, to learn, to be stronger, and to build their character. So you have that goal, but that's not the ultimate goal, right? You have that. You have that. You go into that direction. You go through all the struggles necessary for you to grow up, to take more responsibility, and that's still the define a pretty good way for the kids to grow. But yeah, if that's the necessary to success, no, maybe not. So yeah.
Thank you, Tony. I think if we look at the question of is college necessary, I think we can go back to the most successful tech industry icons that have dropped out of college. So historically, dropping out of college was always a path to someone that would basically innovate their way to success. But now with AI, I think you really start to question what is the applicability of curriculum that has not evolved to keep pace with AI. And more importantly, if you look at the curriculum of the top universities across the world, and I'll give you the IITs as an example. I was conducting an AI conference that was a symposium of IITs in India about 4 years ago. And what I was struck by was how they've innovated in the cross-pollination of their majors. They have now built a dual major system that brings together industry verticals with computer science. And so what that naturally does is, right from your undergrad, students are trained in the sciences, in the disciplines, and in the application of computing to those disciplines. Personally, I've gone through an industry where I transitioned from being in the tech industry to actually doing a stint in healthcare. So I built health tech for 3 years, where all of the health ecosystem is handled through technology, whether it be your front office, your back office, your insurance, your patient management, your doctor management, your specialty treatments. And one thing you'll know is in the US, there is very little competition for the healthcare ecosystem. There are literally only 2 or 3 healthcare vendors. So when you look at education and whether a college degree is necessary, what you'll find is when you look around what the college innovations are, cross-pollinating technology with majors is really critical. Because what has happened is technology has now become a commodity. You can easily get the required technology, but what you miss is the judgment skills in applying the technology to specific disciplines. And so what I'd encourage students right from high school to do is build a wide variety of disciplinary skills, build a wide variety of functional skills, try to have the ability to lead groups, try to form cross-functional teams, what in AWS we used to call pizza teams or 2 pizza teams, where you can bring together some cross-functional team that builds out a business concept, that builds out fundraising for it, that builds the marketing, the product management, and the engineering out of a small team, whether it be at the high school level or the college level, and solve small problems. Because there is plenty of business opportunities at the smallest levels, especially when you look at industry verticals. While everybody chases computer science and computer science is getting commoditized, the industry verticals are still low tech. And when you apply internationalization to that, healthcare is not the same in every country. State laws are not the same for healthcare. So you just take the permutation and combination of healthcare across all the states and across all the countries, and now we have an infinite amount of business problems to solve. And so what I'd encourage students to do is get entrepreneurial, get cross-functional, get collaborative, and build skills that bring computing across industry verticals, and build your mentorship inside and outside of college. If you go to college, that's great, but if you don't go to college, find your mentors through various networking events and other things, and use that mentor network to really grow your career and your guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. So both of you kind of touched on this in your work experience and in your opinions that you shared, but we have had, stepping aside from policy for a little bit, the landscape of AI advancement has really made things a lot more difficult for students as they pick what career to enter and even just what field of education to pursue. So, how would you recommend that families and students prepare for their education and their career future? And how should they be changing given what you've seen in your work in the AI space?
Again, okay. Yeah. I think I might have to repeat myself because the which major our student get to the college into actually is not defining who they will be in a few years. So what matters is they should ask themselves this question: what am I passionate about? What's a problem I want to solve? If today that means if I have to solve this problem while maybe no lunch, no dinner, and for a few days, I still want to do it. That's your passion, right? When you have that kind of passion and you apply everything you learn, or you overcome all the hurdles along the way, you push forward for it, you deliver a solution, and that's what kind of a major you should be in. So you don't want to be in a major that everybody says it's great, and it can give you a good job, you make good money, but at the same time that's not what you want to do. So the repeating myself part will be the 4 years of college is a great way for you to discover what you want to do with your life, and who you want. Maybe you're lucky, who you want to spend a portion of life with, and you filter your friend and build your network, find your mentors, find your peers, the peers that can be inspiring you to be better yourself. I think that's a more fundamental question to ask. Instead of we go out, do a survey. Right? There are a lot of data there. Right? You go LinkedIn and you can find out which profession, what type of job people are making the most money. But then, does that mean that everybody should go to pick that major and to do that kind of job? Not necessary. No, I think it's more like if you ask any consular of automation, right? If you are a parent, you should not be surprised if they said, okay, so let me get to know more of your student and to understand what kind of person he or she want to be in the future, and what's a passion. How do we start to the essay preparation or package preparation? And I think it's basically answering the same question. So what you want to be in the future, that's more important thing, right? In terms of, say, 5 years ago, I would say like maybe 99.9% of people do not know the existence of AI work. A lot of currently the AI stuff, everything everybody was doing, like I think it starts sometime in 2023, right? The Gen AI stuff, ChatGPT moment. So if you ask people then, hey, what's a good major that I will be, right? People will tell you computer science. But then now, if your kids are graduating from computer science right now this year, you already know how hard it is for them to find an entry-level job there, because all the big companies they off. So the world is changing rapidly, very dynamically. But how do we prepare our kids for the future society, the future development? I think we should always come back to the core. What kind of person you want, and what kind of problem you want to solve, and what kind of value do you want to add to this society to make it better? If they can find that out, and it doesn't matter which major. To give a very quick example, the CEO of Anthropic, the hottest AI company, right? She was in chemistry. She did work in chemistry before before he joined SLP. Right? You ask him, okay, so what major will be good for you? I think it's different from time to time. Yeah.
I believe the question was, what's the advice for students and parents on how to approach colleges? And I'm literally living this out right now. I'm a parent of a high school senior, so in the next 6 to 9 months, my daughter is going through the process herself. And I get asked the question every day at home, what should be my major and where should I go? So I'll give the answer that I've given my daughter, which is, I think you need to look at this as build out your skills in a cross-functional way and allow for the flexibility to change your major or maybe take an undeclared major and then consider what you will do beyond that. Broadly, if I look at the industry, I think the commoditization of all jobs with AI is going to mean the erosion of earning power. And the more developed the country and the more advanced the employer, the faster the rate of the erosion. And so as a population that needs to adapt to that, there are things we can do. For example, it is almost the reverse of what we all wanted to do 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we all wanted to work at the Googles and the Metas and the hyperscalers. And with their faster rate of adoption of AI, you may actually want to do the reverse. You may want to find the companies that are actually slowest to get disrupted with AI so that you have a start in the industry and you build out your experience. As I mentioned earlier, you may start in industry verticals, which are surprisingly low tech. You may actually start in the government because the government is even more low tech. And so consider how you will adapt in order to defend your earning power against the erosion that is coming, with the erosion starting in the most advanced tech companies and the most advanced geographic locations. So Silicon Valley may be disrupting the world with AI, but that isn't always the case. If you go to, let's say, North Carolina, you go to Georgia, you go to Ohio, you go to Texas, it's very different. You go to India, you have a rural set of business problems you can solve. So broadly speaking, I would say think out of the box and don't do what worked the last 20 years. Don't aspire to go necessarily into the places where you will get disrupted first. The second thing is think about foundational principles and knowledge. So you can go back down into electronics, hardware design, chip design, and building out systems for infrastructure. as I did with my own career, I sort of went through the full stack. I was an operating system guy, I was a firmware guy, went up the stack, I was a database guy for a while. I went up the stack into healthcare and applications, and then I found we were using AI to build automated applications, went back down to infrastructure again. So be flexible with your career and rotate through different roles, adapting as things change, because everything changes at a pace we've never seen. A year ago, we had no notion of agentic AI. 2 years ago, we had no notion of Gen AI. Now we have OpenClaw and NemoClaw and all of these things that are completely autonomous. And so the other way to look at this is how do you pursue cybersecurity? Because as these autonomous systems come in, you have to think about cybersecurity. So pursuing a career in cybersecurity is another very successful method to look at. And finally, as your earning power declines, think about how you can be an investor rather than just earning money. And so financial education, the ability to invest early in life, the ability to compound your portfolio and to create multiple streams of income, I think will set you up for where you can experiment with your passions. So don't think of life as a linear career, as a singular career. Invest early on in financial skills, building out a portfolio, compounding your portfolio, building out multiple asset classes, multiple streams of income, and then allow for the flexibility to then experiment with the rest of your career and your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those were excellent perspectives. And I know we are pretty much at time for this segment, but I want to just ask both of you if you had a few seconds to share one thing that you would want families to know about any topic, whether it's policy or education.
Do you find it is a hard question? Just kidding. So we are closing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, like AI is rapidly changing the world. At the same time, we still have politicians, special interest groups trying to push the racial-based policies. It's more like, okay, so we are so advanced there in technology, but on the humanity side, but still lagging behind. Right? People are trying to pitch battles among different ethnic groups and trying to say, okay, so this group is the right group, so we grant more preference. That group, sorry, you guys are discriminating. It's a huge gap here. Right. I would like to invite everybody, if you have not been involved in this kind of activities, maybe spend a little more time to understand why are we in such a situation. Because when you spend the time, you will finally, eventually realize a lot of fights we have been doing in this regards is actually we spend time and money to fight against our own tax money, because the politicians, all those like non-profit organizations, they have been pushing all those policies. They were all funded by our tax money. Is that confusing enough? So when we do not pay our attention, our politicians will use our money against us, and this will fan out to the opportunities of our kids in college, in job market, and the resources allocated to different people. Right? A lot of times, the hardworking class, they are not preferred groups. So I would like you to spend more time to get more awareness on this policy making. And in this regard, I think Cupertino residents are doing really good work. We have a lot of people involved in the local politics, and they are in the know of why this happened, why that happened, and if something bad happened, how can we fight against it? And to that, the highest respect to everyone here and a lot of friends. But for people, for the rest of the hardworking friends, the topic we're talking about today, feels very new to you, I really hope you spend more time. Sometimes you slow down, right? When you scroll, when you don't scroll on your phone, you start maybe pay a little more attention on this policy process, and if you can help and come talk to us and get involved, and so that that we don't need everybody to spend a lot of time on all the issues. From time to time, you spend a little bit of time, and together collectively, we can actually make a huge difference. So if you want a common sense to come back, right? Please contribute your time, your energy, and let the politician know that, okay, so we need common sense. We are no more silent. And stop your racial-obsessed policies. We don't like it, and we have shown you time and time again. Every election, we voted no on this. Why are you still trying so hard to bring those back? We don't like it. Please hear us. So yeah, that's a message. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I would say when you think about policy as a parent of a student that eventually is going to college, maybe the starting point is really the extracurriculars that go into your essays about who you are. And as we all know, as parents of high schoolers and students who are in college and who graduated, your ability to write an essay that is powerful, that shows you're giving back to the community, that shows a widely broadened set of skills, are going to make you a more compelling candidate for that college admission. And so a great place to start is to actually contribute by giving back into your local community. That could be in the city councils, through commissions. You could be applying to team commissions, to youth activity boards. You could be working with your school district. You could be participating in the college district. You could join a committee on any of these local bodies. And the way to start that is for the parents to get involved. So if you want your child to get a great college admission, and a great essay makes for a great college admission, and great extracurriculars make for a great essay, policy is one way to differentiate yourself. And students don't get there just by themselves. Parents need to help them get there. And so consider getting on notifications for all agencies, whether it be schools, colleges, cities, counties, and even the state. When you get notified, you have these meetings. Join the meetings, listen to the meetings, have your kids listen to the meetings. Gradually it grows in the system. You get involved, maybe as a commissioner, maybe as a committee member, maybe as a volunteer. Your children get involved, and the process grows within the family. So don't think of policy and legislation as different from us. Ultimately, it is about applying common sense rules that serve the greater good. And the way you get there is maybe starting out with a very self-serving purpose, which is, how do I get my kid into college? It all started with that question, and we can close with that question. If all you care about is that college admission, then tie the dots back, going from admission to the essay, to the extracurricular, to differentiating those extracurriculars, to policy as a way to differentiate, and to get involved in your community to build out that equation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Tony and Santosh. And we will now hand it over to we're excited to have our presentation from IPMAX.
Thank you. Wow, came here to inform and have been greatly informed about things that I know a lot about, but didn't know nearly this much about. Nan's presentation was pretty shocking. I kind of understood the bias, but some of the numbers are pretty shocking. Tony and Santosh, I have to say, I'm encouraged by your parenting and your approach. It's very informative to me, who comes from the humanities. First of all, I am Stephen Felicelli. I am a college advisor, an essay editor. I'm a writer. I have a master's degree in English. So I come from a very different perspective. AI is something different to me and my milieu, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I have to say that was really, a lot of the things that Tony was saying are things that I say to my students. And I worry that parents put too much pressure on 16 and 17-year-olds that, okay, what are you going to do? Where are you going? Most of us, I went into school as a math major, right? So you really need to think more about who you are, what you want to be, and follow that path, and keep in mind everything that Santosh was talking about. That's really interesting to me, that I need to know, that you're really helping me when my kids, my daughter just entered high school, for me to think about. So very informative. I'm going to talk about some slightly different things. I'm going to piggyback on the notion of, I'm going to advocate for what good this does. I think we're all on the same page here, bringing the SAT back. So the SAT, standardized tests in general, are prone to cultural bias. There is a socioeconomic factor. I am that socioeconomic factor. I can help your students get a better grade, better score on those tests, and that's somewhat problematic. The answer to that problem is not getting rid of the SAT. What that does not level the playing field. What it does is just shift the criteria, that metric, shift that criteria to something even less valid and somewhat chaotic. And I think there's been certain results in why schools are going back to it, and I'm all for that. And I want to say something about the SAT. Why is the SAT so good? It's not just as a metric. When I get a new student, the first thing I do is give them the new SAT test, which versus the old SAT test, there are ways to gain. And that's what a lot of students and parents come to me to find ways to get to that better score, irrespective of learning, which bothers me a little bit, but I get it, right? We're trying to do that. The new test is really hard to gain. And so one of the things we need to keep in mind is that students are still learning. And the SAT test works on obviously reading comprehension, but also vocabulary, and also grammar, and also composition. When I'm teaching the SAT, I can point to things like transitionals, like ways of working narrative. That's all happening comprehensively in the test. Very important. It is, as a teaching tool, it's valuable in and of itself, not just as a metric. And obviously the removal of that metric, which creates kind of the open door for the kind of bias that we're seeing that some of the presentations have touched on. And now I just want to talk about one other thing in terms of the reality of getting your kids into school, because that's still important. We talk about, it's important about who you are and what you want to be, but you do want to get into that good school, right? So there are certain realities with AI that you have to embrace in a lot of things that Santosh was talking about. There are certain milieu in which you need to resist AI. For the essays, what we saw, so 2 years ago, with the advent of LLMs, we saw ChatGPT invade essays. The first year we caught about 3, and I say caught, because it's still considered academic dishonesty, caught about 3 or 4 students using them to write their essays for them. Hopefully you see what's problematic about that from a learning perspective and an honesty perspective, okay? The next year, last year, it was more or less all of them. Now this is a problem, okay? And here's the problem. Now you may see, well, I'm going into CS. I'm going into fields where my language skills, why do I need to know these things? Why do I need to be able to do these things? Because if I look at it from my perspective, if there was something that I didn't really need to know, what's the path of least resistance? That's the path I'm going to take. It's not the kid's fault. I have no judgment to my students. I get it, why they do this. Here's the problem. And this is what I'm gonna tell you about the reality. Is it unfair? Yeah, but you're going into an unfair system. Here's something that I can almost guarantee you happens. I'm the kind of person who reads these essays, and have done so. If I have 800 student essays, which are not enjoyable to read, students do not write well, they've never written well, it's not just because of ChatGPT. Students struggle to write, and the essays, because of the prompts, tend to be repetitive. We tend to get the same essay over and over. If I have to read 800 of those essays, and this is part, you hear this a lot, do the UCs actually read all the essays? And they say, yes, we do. Okay, maybe, but then we hear from them over the last couple of years, well, they're less worried about hooks, they're more worried about content and kind of maybe scanning for content. The workload is insane and tedious, okay? Here's what I'm gonna do if I'm going to read these 800 essays. The same path of least resistance that takes students on the path to take ChatGPT and say, hey, write this essay for me. I can do that too. I have ChatGPT detectors, and I know which ones work best because I have to use them in my job. I might take your students' essays, run them through the detector, and decide, oh, just lessen my workload. I don't even have to read those essays. Those are ChatGPT generated. Now, this is not fair. The ChatGPT detectors haven't caught up with ChatGPT, which is over the last 3 years. The first year the ChatGPT essays came, they were garbage. They were not good. They were silly at times. By the next year, they're serviceable and they're getting better. And so I have learned which detectors are the best to catch the AI, but they're still not, like in the legal setting, you couldn't say, and here's what happens. I go to the students, I say, I know you use ChatGPT on this because blah, blah, blah. And no one has ever said, no, I didn't. But they could say that, and I couldn't prove that they did because they're not reliable. They're false positive prone, and they haven't caught up. But I don't need to tell you that if I'm reading these 800 essays. And very important here, there's no transparency. You just get a rejection. I don't have to tell you why you were rejected. So you have to be really careful. And that's where I come in. I am essentially ChatGPT. I help students organize their essays and make sure and so there's a certain level, spell check, Grammarly, there's a certain level that's okay. When students start using them to collect their thoughts, to organize their thoughts, to express themselves, that's dangerous from an educational level. But maybe more importantly, in terms of college admissions, it's dangerous for their applications. And UC won't tell you that happens. I guarantee you it's already happened. So, I'm gonna stop there on what we need to do for getting into college, what we need to think about. I love that Tony talked about try not to put too much pressure on your students. I had more than one student in tears last year. It upsets me. They feel that pressure, and there is a lot of pressure, and it is serious, and you have to take it seriously. But they also have to have the freedom to kind of choose and think about things. They also have to be realistic. I'm very realistic with students, but I also tell them the same things, that you don't have to know where you'll be in 20 years when you're 16, right? So that's the basics here. So SAT, and one of the things you want to do with the SAT is explain the benefits of the SAT, why it's important. Whether it's culturally biased or not, it may be to a certain extent. But have whoever you're arguing this to see that the absence of a metric is insane. That it does not create that level playing field. Secondly, ChatGPT, you have to be careful with it. Because people who are English, so most of the people I run with, English professors, philosophy, or history, they don't feel the same way about AI as you. They see what's happening. And so I'm going to stop with this. A typical exchange at my workplace. I stop a student and I say, okay, because I know their language levels. I get it very, very early on. And I see, okay, so I go to the detector and it looks like, yeah. And so I say, okay, it looks like you use ChatGPT on this. I explain to them that they're not going to develop critical thinking skills. This is problematic for all sorts of reasons. And most importantly, like I just said, it's detectable. You could have your application tossed. And so we talk about their extracurriculars, I suggest topics, we sit there for a couple minutes in front of the empty Google Doc, and it's, what should I write? Or even, I get a couple last year, I can't. So you have this learned helplessness via AI in composition that's really dangerous from an educational perspective. Whereas in other areas, it's great. I mean, I'm amazed at Nan's use of it is brilliant. And there are ways in which it makes it more efficient and it breaks through and streamlines. But in certain areas, you have to be more aware. And that's all I'm gonna say. Okay, any questions about anything at all about college admissions to the UCs or otherwise? Yes.
So, with the change in how they how they review students, we see that the huge difference. Nan's data shows. What's your advice for Asian students? How in your practice, how could they still stand out?
So if the problem is literal, so I don't know if it's a problem. I think Asians are disproportionately affected when it's really a problem of trying to let more Latino and African American and other groups in, and that it necessarily pushes some students out. And Asians are disproportionately affected by that because they're at the highest levels of education. But if that's happening, I don't know. I don't know what you can do if that's what you're doing, what Tony's doing, what you're doing politically to bring awareness to that. But in terms of what you can do as an Asian American, change your name. I mean, I don't know. It's really, there's really not that much you can do. There are things that I would tell students to do of any race in terms of the essay. So that's my expertise is essays. And you want to have essays. So admissions board has a stack of applications. You're either a yes or a no, or you're a maybe. And so if you're in a stack of applications as a maybe, you're not trying to be safe. I keep my students away from writing the safe, kind of cookie cutter, but grammatically correct and structured essay. Those are great. I'm gonna help them do that. But if you don't distinguish yourself from the other essays on that pile, it's not gonna help you. You're not trying to stay out of the no pile, you're trying to get into the yes pile. And so you need to distinguish yourself. And it's hard. The prompts lead students into very similar essays because they've all had very similar experiences. You have a problem in the Bay Area, a lot of East Asian, South Asian students who have very similar backgrounds, similar extracurriculars in Silicon Valley. And so you want to, I listen for, and when I do the interviews with students, I listen for that thing that can kind of move away from that and find that something distinct. But even though they do the same thing, like I do this about immigration stories all the time. We sometimes say, well, the immigration story, but yeah, there's a lot of students with immigration stories, but each one is different. It's a matter of finding, you may have done the exact same thing as someone else, it's completely different. You're completely different, yes.
Do you find yourself trying to find the vulnerability in the student's life? That maybe people won't tell you the negative things that they actually went through.
Absolutely.
Maybe hard parents fighting or divorce or hardship in their childhood. So
Yeah.
people have to dig for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm a lot like a therapist for them. This process is, so I meet students over the course of like 18 hours. And I get their life stories on this, and I have to encourage them. So in one aspect, you have the application, you have all their credentials, and you want to impress with that. That's a brag sheet. The essays are something else, and I have students that want to brag in their essays, and it doesn't come off well. They need to be more vulnerable. They need to be able to express. Negativity is fine. That's all fine. And yeah, so we do a lot of digging. I get their life stories, and I encourage them to be honest. Honesty plays a lot better than, look how great I did at this and this and this in the essays. They do want that. They do want to know how great you are in the applications. The essays are something different. The essays, you're trying to distinguish yourself from other students. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. So thanks for the presentation. Yeah, so I learned a lot, especially about when the AI comes, we will face a lot of problems, whether we need the SAT, whether the others or not. But as a resident in Cupertino, I think we are the most advanced, how to say, the school district in the education. And do we have such kind of expert group for the challenge for the AI age? Or we should make a demo or like the Apple computer something to show the world what's the future education we can make. But so we should find something for one primary school or middle school to show a sample for the future school or future classroom. Yeah, something like this.
Yeah, so AI is coming, it's here. It's being integrated. I think everyone here, because we live in sort of a bubble in Silicon Valley, need to understand the resistance in secondary and higher education in the humanities. There is actually, and this will sound crazy, there's actually a chance that AI doesn't take over literature, art, some of the humanities academia. There's a chance that it doesn't get integrated. It's going to be resisted tooth and nail. It already is. And humanities programs are being reduced and being downsized rapidly. But to your question, right, where do we go forward?
Yeah, should we form something like association or something like to make Cupertino as a sample, as a demo for the future AI education?
Yeah, I mean...
So it's leading the age for the future education.
Well, I think we necessarily are in Cupertino.
Yeah, how to do this?
Yeah.
Any suggestion?
Yeah, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. That's something that I read a lot about, that I'm concerned about. I have like all my friends are in tech and we talk about this and I alert them to the dangers of AI. There's something, does anybody know about Socratic AI? Ever heard of it? So the problem with AI is going to be, say you use Google AI. For one thing, Google AI, you get a nugget of information from that. The good thing about it is it's cleaner and it's become accurate. It was very inaccurate at first, just like ChatGPT, and then suddenly it's pretty accurate. You get a pretty objective sense of whatever you're asking it, which is better than rabbit holes, social media rabbit holes of doing your own research and finding things that just kind of agree with what you want to know. So in that sense, it's great. Where it's a problem is it leads to a kind of superficial knowledge of things. If you start approaching knowledge as instrumentalized rather than integrated as understanding, when you start using knowledge like you're taking it off the shelf, using it and putting it back, they've done MRI studies on this. And subjects' brains tend to light up when they're asked a question in the part of their brain that tells them where to go to get that answer, rather than the knowledge base. That should be alarming to people. So what you end up with is you get these facts, but it can be superficial knowledge. You have the illusion of knowledge. How do you use AI? And that's Socratic AI is a way to deepen that knowledge rather than having these little superficial bites of knowledge and generating deeper knowledge. That to me would be a great, so this stuff usually takes the path of least resistance. And so I don't think Socratic AI is going to catch on. I think it's kind of brilliant. I would like to see something like that, something that lends depth, that recognizes the danger of superficiality with knowledge. Something along that line. But this isn't something, I don't have a plan for this. This is hard stuff. And that we definitely need to talk about. This presentation was really a good part of this. Yes?
I really like this autonomous discussion. So do we have something like the discussion group so we can frequently find some issue and exactly to make it practice in the school, our kids will.
Yeah, I don't know. And does anyone know? Do you know in the Cupertino School District, or you're talking about like this,
Yeah.
like a regular meeting like this? I don't know. So I'm not from
Yeah,
here.
we
yeah.
can. A lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Can I add something?
Yes, go ahead.
That's a great question. Very good initiative. But be warned that when the government, like in the sense, like public school part of the government also,
Yeah.
right? So if you count on the government to the innovation, you should pay 100 times of what a private company will take. Right. So I would rather to wait or work with let's say Apple or Google, Nvidia,
Yeah.
or some other company, private company, to do the innovation and to bring the AI world, like the future AI in education, to the community. Instead of, okay, we please the government, please allocate money to enrich our schools and to make sure our kids can have the share of the AI development. You know, they could be doing that, but be prepared to pay for that. Maybe 100 or even more times than what it costs.
Yeah.
Right.
So we need action. We need action just right now.
Yeah, but that's why you cannot count on government to do that.
Oh yeah.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, maybe talk to private companies and pitch your idea, right? Tell them, okay, we need this. Can you do that for us, right? I think that's a much faster solution there. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have children in school in the Cupertino?
Yeah, we have graduated. Yeah.
What grade?
We have graduated from the in
Oh, okay, yeah. And I'm sure, yeah. So I don't know, you might know how you organize, right? You need to organize. And this is an instance of organizing today.
Yeah, I don't have an answer either, but I think it's great feedback, and when we are in touch with our CUSD board members, one of them was just here in the audience, and we can always let them know, and maybe they can take that feedback. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for your excellent presentation that actually answered a lot of the questions I had around AI, how does the change in test mandate from colleges. Thank you for the rich information.
Thank you.
And I want to also thank all of our other panelists. Thank you to Santosh Rao, Tony Guan, Vice Mayor Chao, and also Mina Shu is our current Parks and Recreation Commission Chair, and she's the one that helped Library Commission Chair, and she helped plan this event. So thank you to her as well. And
all speakers.
We'll come up for a photo for
Yeah, you guys together, right?
and thank you to the audience for
All the
participating.
speaker. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, please.